Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and today is officially the start of spoiler season for Magic the Gathering's Final Fantasy expansion, which we've all been waiting very impatiently for. I'm super excited about this set, and they didn't disappoint. They dropped an absolute ton of cards on us today, and we're going to go over all of them, so we do have a lot to get through. We're going to keep this introduction brief because of that. Please like the video, it helps me get it out to so many more people and helps the channel grow, and subscribe if you're new because I have a ton of crazy content on the way, more spoiler content, more deck techs, all the good stuff, all the shenanigans, but let's dive right in. First off, we're going to start with Adventurers Inn, a land town. When this land enters, you gain 2 life, and you can tap it to add a colorless mana. Now, they did point out in the debut video that the town subtype on land is going to matter in some way, but they haven't really shown us how it matters yet. But they use the example of guild gates, where there are some cards in Magic that care about guild gates and give you more benefits based on having guild gates and stuff like that. And towns are going to be, you know, something similar to that. So pretty interesting here, just seeing a colorless land that taps for colorless mana, doesn't enter tapped, gives you 2 life. Could be really interesting in an all colorless deck, but until we see the different town mechanics that synergize with town, not really sure what to make of it. Next up, we've got Black Mage's Rod, 1 black and 1 for an artifact equipment, and you job select when you play it, which means as it enters, it creates a 1/1 colorless hero creature token, and then you attach the Black Mage's Rod to that creature token. Can also equip for 3. An equipped creature gets +1/+0, has whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent, and is a wizard in addition to its other types. Pretty interesting here. We saw this mechanic leaked a few weeks ago, and I went over it in the leak video. If you haven't seen that already, it is in the Final Fantasy Spoiler Season playlist. I'm going to make sure and link that in the description and in the comments. All of the other things that have been spoiled before the official debut, whether it's leaks or official spoilers teasing things, have been covered in other videos, so all of those videos can be found there. This is pretty interesting. I think we're going to get a ton of these equipment cards, and I think Equipment Tribal is really going to be a thing based on some of the other cards that are coming later. But this by itself, it's just kind of cool to get a sneak peek of what this mechanic's going to look like, and the fact that we can turn any creature into a wizard. All of these, you know, all of these artifact equipments within the set are specific weapons to specific classes and jobs that let you turn into that class. So it's going to be kind of like a build your own tribal, and I find that kind of interesting. Next up, we've got Commune with Beavers. 1 green for a sorcery. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. Reveal an artifact, creature, or land card from among them. Put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom in any order. Very simple, common, meant for limited, but the flavor here is very on point. It's perfect, right? Anyone that's played Final Fantasy II, if you have played Final Fantasy II, shout out to you, knows exactly what this card is all about and what it's referencing. If you know, let me know in the comments, because that means you're a real one. Next up, we've got Dragoon's Wyvern, a 2/1 Drake with flying for 1 blue and 2, and when this creature enters, you create a 1/1 colorless hero creature token. So this is confirming that that sort of a job select mechanic that we saw is not the only way to make these hero creature tokens, because Dragoon's Wyvern here will make one. And getting a 2/1 flyer for 3 that also gives you another 1/1 body is actually pretty good for a common, and I could see this getting a lot of play in limited. But next up, we've got Malboro, one of the iconic creatures from Final Fantasy, a 4/4 plant horror for 2 black and 4. It has swamp cycling for 2. So again, we're seeing Wizards kind of keep up with the trends they've been establishing over the last few sets with finding ways of having easy, common means of color fixing you in limited. And then we also have the Bad Breath ability here. So once you do get to 6 mana and you do want to hard cast this guy, when it enters, each opponent discards a card, loses 2 life, and exiles the top 3 cards of their library. The exile clause there in particular is pretty interesting, because if your opponent's trying to set up the top of their deck, you don't even have to give them the opportunity to get value off of things going to the graveyard. They're just exile. It's not just mill, right? And I think that's just kind of interesting. But all in all, just a pretty interesting piece for limited to help with mana fixing. Next up, we've got White Mage's Staff. This is another card that we already spoiled in the leaked spoiler video that I did a few weeks ago, but this is the official unveiling now, so we are going to cover it. 1 white and 1 for an artifact equipment, has that job select ability, so you'll get a 1/1 colorless hero creature token when it enters, and attach this to it for free. Otherwise, it equips for 3. Equipped creature gets +1/+1, has whenever this creature attacks, you gain 1 life, and is a cleric in addition to its other types. So again, build your own tribal deck, right? Turn whatever you want into a cleric, get some life gain triggers. You could even equip this onto something that's already a cleric just to kind of double up on life gain triggers and have more ways to get life gain triggers in a deck that cares about that sort of thing. And I feel like that's where this is going to be at home, so pretty interesting, especially for a common. It means that an archetype like that could exist in Limited. And next up is the last common we saw today, and that's Ice Magic. 1 blue and 1 for an instant, and it has tiered. And you're going to see all of the elemental magic in this set have this tiered ability because it meshes perfectly flavor-wise with the way Final Fantasy's magic system works. So, a tiered card allows you to pay one of 3 additional costs, your choice. It's almost like multi-kicker, except you don't get to choose more than one. You can only pick one, and you have to pick one. So in that way, it's sort of kind of like Spree in a way too. So you play it, you have to pick one of these additional costs, and then based on the additional cost that you pick, you get a different, more buffed up effect if you're paying more mana. So in this case, with Ice Magic, it's an instant for 1 blue and 1. For an extra cost of 0, you return target creature to its owner's hand. So 2 mana instant speed bounce. But then Blizzara is an extra cost of 2. Target creature's owner puts it on their choice of the top or bottom of their library. So it's going to cost a total of 4 mana if you use Blizzara. But it is instant speed, and they have to put it on the top or bottom, which is way better than bounce. If they put it on top, it basically means they're skipping their draw step and you bounced it. Functionally, it's the same as that, which is really, really good. And if they put it on the bottom, they're just never going to see it again. So that's good too. And then Blizzaga, even crazier. If you want to dump an extra 6 mana into this thing, 1 blue and 5, spend a total of 8 mana, which is kind of absurd, but remember, this is a common, and target creature's owner shuffles it into their library. I still think this is good. If it was only the Blizzaga mode, it would be awful. But the fact that your crappy instant removal that's just meant to do what it needs to do as you're curving out can also be this insanely good removal. If you have a bunch of extra mana later on in the game in Limited, you can just completely get rid of their big bomb forever pretty much by shuffling it in so that they don't know when it's coming up. It might not even ever be drawn again. It's better than killing it, right? It's better than exiling it even, because there are some ways to get value off of exile these days. So it's just gone completely. It's the best way you can remove something, in my opinion. So it makes sense that it costs that much, especially considering it's a common. But again, we're just seeing an opportunity here to present the mechanics for these tiered spells. And after seeing this as an example, I'm really excited about seeing what the rest do, especially if maybe we get some rares, some really crazy rare spells that have this tiered ability. Really exciting stuff, looking forward to seeing more. But that's going to bring us to our uncommons. The first of which is Sid Timeless Artificer, a 4/4 legendary human artificer for 4 mana in the colors of Azorius. Artifact creatures and heroes you control get +1/+1 for each artificer you control and each artificer card in your graveyard. And a deck can have any number of cards named Sid Timeless Artificer. What makes this even better is you can cycle it for 1 blue and 1 white to draw a card. And that's an easy way of putting Sid into your graveyard, because he'll buff when you finally play a copy of Sid. He's going to buff up your creatures equal to the number of artificers in play and in your graveyard. So you can just keep cycling cards, keep putting them in your graveyard, and then have a graveyard full of Sids, and then eventually you just slam one on a board where you have a bunch of artifact creatures or heroes or maybe both, and they all get an extremely huge buff and can just smash in out of nowhere. It could be really, really insane. It could also work super well in a discard deck using something like Monument to Endurance, since every Sid can just be cycled away, and then whenever you want you can actually just play one, and even if your opponent removes it, it'll just go to the graveyard, continue to fuel future copies of Sid, which is nuts. Being able to have any number of them in your deck just makes this card crazy. And they went the extra mile thematically supporting this concept, because Sid's first appearance was in Final Fantasy II, and there has been a Sid in every single Final Fantasy since, and they actually made a different art for Sid from each of the mainline games, starting with Final Fantasy II all the way up to 16, the last entry. And so they have a different version of Sid. It's the same mechanical flavor, or the same mechanical card, rather, but the flavor and art's just a little bit different to coincide with each of the different games' versions of Sid. So you have Final Fantasy II here, and then you have Final Fantasy III, and then Final Fantasy IV, 5, 6, 7, and one thing I do want to note is some of these Sids are more prominent than others, and I do believe that some of the more important Sids are going to get an additional card in the set, and there will be another version that's more specific to that Sid, with Sid from Final Fantasy VII being one of those, I'm pretty sure. But still, just as an extra bonus, being able to have a version of the Timeless Artificer Sid that has, you know, Sid from Final Fantasy VII's art is still really, really cool as an extra. But I wouldn't count out the idea that he's going to get his own card that's very specific to him, because he's a very important Sid, and we may see a couple of those. Next up, we've got Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy IX, Final Fantasy X, Final Fantasy XI, Final Fantasy XII, 13, 14, one of my favorites because I love that game, 15, and then finally Sid from Final Fantasy XVI, who was the absolute best character in that game. Sid from 16 was the GOAT. Loved that dude. The story in that game was amazing. But yeah, I think this card is really cool. I think what they're trying to do is really cool. And I actually think it's mechanically going to be really interesting. What I'm really curious about the most is how relevant might this be in Limited? Since it is an uncommon, you can maybe draft a pretty decent number of these and maybe try to make like a Sid archetype deck in Limited. I don't know for sure. We're going to have to wait and see. Like, are there more copies of Sid? Is it like more common to get a copy of Sid than any other uncommon because there's so many different versions? I'm going to guess probably not. But there's a part of me that's hoping he's just a little bit more common than the other uncommons so that we could actually maybe draft that archetype. I just think it would be super fun. But we're going to move on to the rest of the uncommons here. Next up, we've got the Crystals Chosen. This is another one that we covered in a leak a few weeks ago, but it was officially spoiled today, so we're going to go over it again. 2 white and 5 for a sorcery. You make 4 1/1 colorless hero creature tokens, and then put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. I think this card's going to be awesome in Limited because the high mana cost doesn't matter as much. But what I'm interested in trying to do is figuring out a way to convoke this spell out in a deck that uses a bunch of token creatures, just to make even more token creatures and then go crazy with counters. I feel like there are cards in Standard right now that can give our non-creature spells convoke. I'm pretty sure there's a battle that does it. If you remember which card that is, let me know in the comments, but that could be really cool with this. Next up, we've got Fire Magic, another one of those tiered elemental magic spells we were talking about earlier. This is an instant for 1 red mana, has the tiered ability, so you have to choose 1 additional cost. For an extra 0 mana, it deals 1 damage to each creature. For an extra 2 mana, it deals 2 damage to each creature. For an extra 5 mana, it deals 3 damage to each creature. So, if you pay 3 mana, it's kind of an overcosted Pyroclasm, although it's instant speed, so that might be kind of worth it. But then the fact that you have the versatility to just play this for just 1 mana and kill everything with 1 toughness seems kind of awesome. And then if you do happen to have a whole bunch of mana, and you can sink it into this, you can kill some stuff that have 3 toughness with the Fire Aga ability. So the versatility is awesome, especially since this is an uncommon. Being able to use it in Limited is going to be nuts. This is going to be a very high pick card in Limited, I'm pretty sure, especially because it's at instant speed, because you can use it as like a combat trick and not necessarily have to only kill things that have like 1 or 2 toughness, right? You can make your opponent block or block your opponent's stuff in a way where their stuff's gonna die after you cast the fire magic. So I think it being instant speed is super relevant, and I think the card being as versatile as it is important, and I think it's gonna be really, really good in Limited. Next up, we've got Renoa Hardily, an uncommon legendary creature, a 4/4 human rebel warlock for 5 mana in the colors of Selesnya. When she enters, you create Angelo, a legendary 1/1 green and white dog creature token, and then she has the Angelo Cannon ability. Whenever Renoa Hardily attacks, another target creature you control gets +1/+1 until the end of turn for each creature you control. So the one thing that's kind of a bummer about this is she has to attack herself, and then she gives the buff to any other creature that's not her. Usually that's probably just going to be the Angelo token, which makes sense thematically. But the fact that she has to attack to trigger it means your opponent can just block and kill your Renoa so that you don't get to keep using it every single turn, which is kind of a bummer. But that being said, that buff could get hugely important and just massively swing the game depending on what the board state looks like. So it could be pretty cool. And again, it being an uncommon, it's definitely meant for limited. And I feel like in limited, this card would actually be pretty good. It has a better chance of being able to survive. So yeah, I think for limited, this card's going to be really, really good. I don't know if it quite makes the cut for constructed because it's a little expensive and easy to shut down, but it's a pretty sweet card. Next up, we've got 𝐽𝑒𝑚𝑒, the Time Sorcerer. I can't talk. I need coffee. 𝐽𝑒𝑚𝑒, the Time Sorceress. 5 mana in the colors of 𝐷𝑒𝑚𝑒 for a 4/5 legendary human warlock. And when she enters or attacks, you get to surveil 2. It's important to note that it works on enters and attacking. So even if they kill her right away, you still get that initial surveil 2. But the longer she stays out, the more value you can get. You can keep surveilling every single turn, which is going to get you that scry value on the top of your deck, but also potentially put things in your graveyard that are valuable to have there. And then, in addition, at the beginning of your end step, you may pay a whopping 8 mana, 2 black, 2 black, 2 blue, and 4, and exile 8 cards from your graveyard to transform 𝐽𝑒𝑚𝑒. Now, don't get me wrong, 8 mana and 8 cards is an awful lot. That being said, this is an uncommon. You can do this in limited, and when she transforms, she becomes 𝐽𝑒𝑚𝑒 Omnipotent, a 7/7 legendary nightmare warlock with menace, and the time compression ability, which means when this creature transforms into 𝐽𝑒𝑚𝑒 Omnipotent, you take an extra turn after this one. This is the first uncommon we've ever seen that grants an extra turn, and all you have to do is transform her. Granted, it is super expensive to transform her, but you can still do this in limited. You can get free turns in limited, which seems nuts. And what I want to do, what's exciting to me the most, is to build a constructed deck around Soul Cauldron and creatures with transform abilities that are really cheap, because you can put the counter on 𝐽𝑒𝑚𝑒 to transform her with an alternate transform ability, because it will inherit whatever transform abilities are on whatever creature you exile with the Soul Cauldron. If you do that, the front side and the back side will both have those activated abilities to transform. So you could just keep transforming her back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and taking infinite turns for the rest of the game. You know we have to build that in Standard. It's going to be absolutely bonkers. It's going to be one of the first decks, not the first deck. I already know what I'm making as a first deck, and we'll get to that later on in this video, but it's definitely going to be one of the first decks we make because it's just going to be insane, and the fact that this is an uncommon, and we could potentially make a broken combo in Standard around this uncommon, just seems super fun to me. I'm absolutely going to try it, and I can't wait. But next up, we've got Summon Fenrir, and the summons in this set are my favorite cards in the entire set. This is a 3/2 for 1 green and 2. It's an enchantment creature saga wolf. So all of the summons are enchantment sagas that are also creatures. It's the first time they've ever done this, and it fits perfectly thematically with what summons are, because they show up for a little bit, they maybe cast a couple spells, and then eventually they go away, which is exactly what happens when you run out of the lore counters on your summons here in the Magic game, in Magic the Gathering, because that's what sagas do. They have the lore counters, and then eventually they become sacrificed. It's just too perfect. On Chapter 1, you have the Crescent Fang ability. Search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. On Chapter 2, you have Heavenward Howl. When you next cast a creature spell this turn, that creature enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. And then on Chapter 3, you have Ecliptic Growl. Draw a card if you control the creature with the greatest power or tied for the greatest power. So you have a little bit of card draw, you have a little bit of lasting board presence for when Fenrir goes away, you have a little bit of ramp, you kind of have a little bit of everything in this, which I love. But don't forget about the fact that not only are you getting the lore abilities, you also have a 3/2 creature here, so you can get some of the lore abilities and then maybe trade it for one of their creatures and get even more value out of it. There's just going to be some really interesting ways to build around these cards and reuse them. Flicker effects are going to be super cool, especially because most flickers that are standard legal these days are built around sagas and not being able to flicker sagas, specifically because it's so broken. But because these sagas are creatures, most flicker effects can target creatures regardless of whether they're an enchantment or a saga or whatever. So you're going to be able to flicker something like Fenrir and keep reusing it, and you're going to be able to do that for a lot of these summons with your normal, traditional, standard legal flicker cards that are around, and that's just really exciting to me. I can't wait to build something like that. But let's move on to the next card, which is the Emperor of Palamecia, a 2/2 legendary human noble wizard for 2 mana in the colors of Izzet. You can tap it for a blue or red, but spend this mana only to cast a non-creature spell. So it's a 2/2 2-mana dork with stipulations. But also, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, if at least 4 mana was spent to cast it, you put a +1/+1 counter on the Emperor of Palamecia, and then if it has 3 or more +1/+1 counters on it, you get to transform it. So basically, you cast, 4 big spells, 3 big spells, whatever the case may be, and then eventually it transforms. It transforms into the Lord Master of Hell, a 3/3 legendary demon noble wizard with the Starfall ability. Whenever the Lord Master of Hell attacks, it deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of non-creature, non-land cards in your graveyard. So you want to go super spell heavy with this guy, and then eventually just Alpha Strike with Lord Master of Hell and just nuke your opponent into the ground. Seems pretty fun. I'm personally really excited to use it in Limited. But next up, we've got Fang Fearless Li, a 2/3 legendary human warrior for 1 black and 2, and whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, you draw a card and lose a life. This ability triggers only once each turn. Pretty interesting as an uncommon already, but you'll notice the reminder text there that it says melds with Vanille, cheerful Li. And it's really, really cool. Thematically, Fang and Vanille are searching for each other in Final Fantasy XIII, and when they find each other, things get kind of bananas. And so thematically, Fang here being able to draw cards as you go through your graveyard is sort of reminiscent of her searching for Vanille, and then when we get to Vanille, you'll see why. Vanille Cheerful Li is a 3/2 legendary human cleric for 1 green and 3, and when she enters, you mill 2 cards and then return a permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. So thematically, it kind of feels like they're searching for each other, which is just awesome, and it's exactly what they do in the Final Fantasy XIII game, which is just great. But also, on its surface, just a 4-mana 3/2 that mills some cards and brings back any permanent is going to be really awesome in Limited. Both of these cards are going to be pretty good in Limited, even if you don't manage to get both, which is what I kind of like the most. But if you do manage to get both, you have this extra ability here. At the beginning of your first main phase, if you both own and control Vanille and a creature named Fang Fearless Li, you may pay 5 mana in the colors of Golgari. If you do, you exile them both and meld them together into Ragnarok Divine Deliverance. That's right, we have another meld card in this set, which is bananas, and it's an uncommon. You can do this in Limited. This is Ragnarok Divine Deliverance, a 7/6 legendary beast avatar with Vigilance, Menace, Trample, Reach, and Haste. Just, can you imagine just flipping this guy in Limited? It's gonna be gross, man. We have to draft that. That has to be like one of our goals, day 1, is to draft a deck that can do this, because you can do it in Limited. That's just crazy. It's just crazy that this is an uncommon. But anyway, you also have an extra ability here. When Ragnarok dies, destroy target permanent and return target non-legendary permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So even when it dies, you get to nuke their best thing, bring your best thing back, and probably still win, which is awesome. I just love seeing that there's a card like this. But now, it's time to move on to the rares. First up, Aith Gainsboro, a 2/2 legendary human cleric with lifelink for 1 white and 2. And whenever you gain life, you put a +1/+1 counter on Aith Gainsboro. When Aith Gainsboro dies, you put X +1/+1 counters on each legendary creature you control, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters on Aith Gainsboro. So she's sort of like a super Ajani's Pridemate, being able to trigger herself because of her own lifelink ability for an extra mana. But then it gets really crazy because you can actually put those counters on your other stuff when she dies, and you get to double, triple, quadruple, just pile up exponentially more counters on things if you're playing Legendary Tribal. Which makes me wonder, is there going to be enough support within this set to have a Life Gain Matters deck and a Legendary Matters deck in the same deck? Can we have an entire deck that cares about life gain triggers and gets you life gain triggers, but it's also made up of almost entirely legendary creatures so that we can double down on her synergies? I would love that. But more important than the functionality of that, this is just perfect thematically. And if you know, you know. I'm not going to spoil it here, but that ability just works so perfectly with what happens to her in this story. I love it, even though I kind of hate it. Because I love that I hate it. I'm not going to go into it. If you know, you know. Next up, we've got Cloud, Midgar Mercenary. He certainly knows. He's a 2/1 legendary human soldier mercenary for 2 white mana. And when he enters, you search your library for an equipment card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. So tutors for literally any equipment. And with how crazy Corey Steel Cutter has been lately, that has to be good, right? Even that alone just has to be good. But it doesn't stop there. As long as Cloud is equipped, if an ability of Cloud or an equipment attached to it triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. So, if you equip Cloud with that Corey Steel Cutter, and then cast a second spell, you get to make 2 tokens? That seems good. Not to mention all of the other ridiculous shenanigans you can get up to with other equipment. It's important to note that if you attach swords to this guy, all of the sword abilities are going to trigger twice. Even if you have abilities that you somehow give to Cloud that aren't necessarily having anything to do with equipment, if it's an ability that's on Cloud that triggers, it's going to double, which could present some pretty interesting things. So if you have ideas about how to utilize that to its fullest, definitely let me know in the comments, because I feel like the depth of potential for that is absolutely insane. And even though this guy's just a 2/1 for 2 and looks unassuming, I think he's going to be the backbone of a very important equipment deck in Standard that might be tier 1 moving forward. I just think it's going to be bananas. But next up, we've got Jill, Shivas Dominant, a 2/2 legendary human noble warrior for 1 blue and 2. And when she enters, you return up to 1 other target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So she's sort of like a Mana War, except she also has this ability to pay 2 blue and 3, tap her, exile her, and then return her to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control. You can only use this ability as a sorcery. She comes back as Shiva, Warden of Ice, a 4/5 legendary enchantment creature saga elemental. That's a mouthful. On Chapter 1 and 2, she has the Mesmerize ability, making it so target creature can't be blocked this turn. And then on Chapter 3, she casts Cold Snap, taps all lands your opponents control, and then exiles herself, returns her to the battlefield as her former mode, as Jill Shivas Dominant, which will then allow you to bounce something all over again. And you can just kind of like keep doing this every other turn or so to your heart's content, which seems kind of crazy. Again, I'm just loving the way that they're handling the summon spells in this game, and especially with the Final Fantasy 16 characters and how they're dominants and they can transform into summons, the way that they're handling that with there being a summon on the back, but the summon on the back is still perfectly meshing with the way summons are done throughout the rest of the set, you know, still being sagas, still being creatures and that sort of thing. Just kind of love it. I think this card's going to be super, super fun. And anything that has to hit and do combat damage to trigger any kind of ridiculous abilities is probably going to be really good with Shiva, because out of nowhere you can just pay 5, make something unblockable so that you can make sure you get those triggers. But next up, we've got Arden, the Usurper, a 4/4 legendary elder human noble for a whopping 8 mana, 3 black and 5. But demons you control have Menace, Lifelink, and Haste. So if you think demon decks were a little crazy to begin with, they're about to get a whole lot crazier. He also has the Star Scourge ability, so at the beginning of combat on your turn, you exile up to one target creature card from any graveyard, and if you exile the card this way, you make a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 5/5 black demon. If you can somehow reanimate this back onto the battlefield while you have an Unholy Annex out, every time you trigger that Star Scourge ability and bring back a card, it's going to count as that demon, so you're going to be able to get those drains off the Unholy Annex instead of losing life, which seems awesome to me. But I'm not even sure if... This guy's so expensive, you're definitely going to want to reanimate him, right? And if you're reanimating him, are you just ending the game so quick that you don't need the Unholy Annex? I don't know. It's hard to say. Either way it ends up going, I think Demon Tribal is going to be a real thing after this set. I mean, it's already kind of a real thing, right? We just have kind of limited options for what to use in it. But it'll be curious to see if this card ends up being better with something like an Unholy Annex and focusing on like a Demon Tribal kind of theme, or if it's just going to be really good in a Reanimator deck, because I could see it going either way. But obviously if there's a deck that combines both, that deck's going to be bananas. We'll have to wait and see, but if you have ideas, definitely let me know in the comments. Next up, we've got the Darkness Crystal. One of my favorite cards that's been spoiled so far. This is a legendary artifact for 2 black and 2. All black spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. If a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, you instead exile it and gain 2 life. You can also pay 2 black and 4, tap it, put target creature card exiled with the Darkness Crystal onto the battlefield tapped under your control with 2 additional +1/+1 counters on it. So this is kind of like a Control Mage's wet dream. All of your cards are costing less. Whenever you kill stuff, you're exiling it, and you're gaining life to pad out your life total against aggro decks. All you want to do is just play this in like mono black control and just nuke everything your opponent's putting down, build up your life total, exile everything so that they can't do any graveyard shenanigans, and then eventually, once you're stabilized, you just start using its ability every turn to bring their best creatures back, have them work for you. That just seems really awesome. Could mono black control make a comeback? I hope so. I think that could be super fun. More than likely though, something like this gets used in like a 𝐴 control, where you have access to counter spells, you can hold up instant speed interaction, and then if you don't need to use it, use this ability to bring their best creature back and have it work as a win condition for you. Everything this card is doing just seems awesome to me. And you can even run it with like 𝐴 Synthesizer if you want, and trigger the synthesizer and just get extra value. I don't know, maybe there's a hybrid deck there just waiting to be discovered, but let me know how you feel about this in the comments. We're gonna move on. Next up, we've got Kain, Traitorous Dragoon, a 2/4 legendary human knight for 1 black and 2. Has the jump ability, so during your turn he has flying, which works pretty much the same way for every Dragoon within this set, which is important to note. That's sort of how they're handling the idea of a Dragoon wielding a spear and using that jump ability, is it's mechanically just sort of being used in this way as like a one-way flying sort of. But also, whenever Kain deals combat damage to a player, that player gains control of Kain, and if they do, you draw that many cards, create that many tapped treasure tokens, and lose that much life. So, if you can pump Kain up to high hell, you can draw a ton of cards, draw a whole new grip of cards if you want, make a whole bunch of treasure tokens to cast some ridiculous bomby spell. The only problem there is you're going to lose control of Kain, and you're going to lose a bunch of life the more you buff him up to do that. But there can be some tricksy ways to really make this work, like flickering Kain so that he comes back into play on your side after you lose control of him, so that you get to draw all the cards and make all the treasure, so you can cast your ridiculous bomb spells, but still get Kain back on your side and keep doing it. I think doing something like that would be super fun, and I'm really excited to see if we can build something like that. But if you have ideas about how you'd use Kain, let me know. I think thematically, this is like perfect for what he does in the game, for what his character arc is in the game, and I kind of love it, but let me know how you feel in the comments. Next up, we've got Summon, Primal Odin. Another summon spell, this one being from Final Fantasy XIV, where they specifically called the summons primals, and that's why it's called Primal Odin. This is a 5/3 enchantment creature saga knight for 2 black and 4. On Chapter 1, you destroy target creature an opponent controls. On Chapter 2, you've got Zantetsuken, so this creature gains whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, that player just loses the game. And then Chapter 3, you have Hall of Sorrow, draw 2 cards, and each player loses 2 life. So Chapter 2 is where the meat and potatoes are, right? No matter what on Chapter 1, you get to destroy something, so even if they kill your Odin, you got value out of it, and it's not a waste. But if they don't manage to destroy him by Chapter 2 or prevent you from swinging in and doing combat damage with him, they just lose the game outright. But even if they do manage to dodge that, you can kind of make up for it with Chapter 3, getting some more value, make them lose 2 life, you get to draw 2 cards, and then, you know, live to fight another day. So, really interesting card here where the ultimate sort of seems like it's on the middle chapter instead of the last chapter, and I think they've done that very specifically. It's almost like Chapter 3 is like a booby prize. Like, oh, you didn't get there, you didn't get the thing. Well, if you're not dead, at least have some extra value. Try next time, you know, do better next time. Just a really interesting sort of play line that you can try to pursue with this. I could foresee combo decks trying to make this guy unblockable with the Shiva that we already saw, you know, the Jill card that transforms into the Shiva, or finding other ways to force through combat damage with this guy, maybe like trample or evasion or something like that. Just seems like some interesting possibilities to brew with it for sure, and I'm just loving these summons. But next up, we've got Zodiark Umbral God, a 5/5 legendary god with Indestructible for 5 mana, 5 black mana, which is really, really hard to play in anything but monocolor. And when he enters, each player sacrifices half the non-god creatures they control of their choice, rounded down. And whenever a player sacrifices another creature, you put a +1/+1 counter on Zodiark. The fact that he's indestructible is kind of insane. He comes down as a 5/5 Indestructible for 5 on rate, as long as you have the 5 black mana, which, like I said earlier, you probably means you're playing mono black. But either way, his final ability there is going to trigger off any sacrifice, so if you were to use him in a sacrifice deck, you could be sacrificing your own stuff and putting +1/+1 counters on Zodiark, which seems pretty good. You could also use it with flicker spells to keep triggering that enters ability, making our opponent sacrifice half their non-god creatures. You could even maybe play this in a god deck with other gods, so that you never have to sacrifice anything yourself. And that's probably wishful thinking. That's probably a little too hard to pull off, but the potential's at least there. But if you have ideas about how you want to use Zodiark, definitely let me know in the comments. It's another one of those cards that I feel like sky's the limit for where it could go. But next up, we've got Firion, Wild Rose Warrior. This was actually the first card spoiled on the debut video. This is a 3/3 legendary human rebel warrior for 1 red and 2. Equipped creatures you control have haste, and whenever a non-token equipment you control enters, you create a token that's a copy of it, except it has this equipment's equip abilities cost 2 less to activate. Sacrifice that token at the beginning of the next upkeep. This is kind of insane. If you have equipment that makes a token creature that it's automatically attached to, like the 4 Mirrodin ability or the new Job Select ability, the token's just going to get haste because it's going to automatically be attached with this thing, which seems kind of crazy, and you get a token copy of that equipment when you play it, which makes another token creature that it's automatically attached to, which will also have haste. Just seems absolutely bananas. With cards like that, I'm pretty sure this is meant to be used with a deck that's just super deep on the weapons that give the job mechanics, the job select equipments that are coming in this set. I think there's supposed to be a standard deck that's just like hard focused on that, or maybe uses mostly that, but some other equipment. Maybe there's multiple different types of equipment decks that are going to exist in standard after this set. It just seems like equipment's being pushed super hard, but that's the best way to use this. And then obviously there's like Quarry Steel Cutter, which is just going to be nuts with this. Get 2 Quarry Steel Cutters, which are each going to make tokens. And if the token Quarry Steel Cutter makes a token, that token will stay, even though the token Quarry Steel Cutter will go away at end of turn. So that's kind of cool, I guess. I just feel like there's so many different ways you can abuse this. It seems really interesting. You can also, again, use this with all of the different sword equipments that tend to equip for 2 mana, so that they equip for 0 mana, and that seems awesome as well. Just being able to give whatever you want haste with your equipment seems nuts. Equipment Tribal is just going to be bonkers, guys. It's going to be absolutely bonkers. I'm telling you, they've been trying so hard to make equipment actually work in Standard for so long, and it just never does. They keep putting out just a little bit more gas, and it's never enough. Now it's finally going to be enough. These cards are bananas. But next up, we've got Gilgamesh, Master at Arms, just to further prove my point. This is a 6/6 Legendary Human Samurai for 2 red and 4. When he enters or attacks, you look at the top 6 cards of your library, put any number of equipment cards from among them onto the battlefield, put the rest on the bottom in a random order, and when you put one or more equipment onto the battlefield this way, you can attach one of them to a samurai you control. Now, if you happen to have other samurais in your deck, cool. You have even more versatility, and you get to attach it to them if you want. But most of the time, that equipment that you're getting into play for free is just going to freely attach to Gilgamesh himself. And what makes this even crazier is that it continues to trigger every time you attack, not just when you enter. It's when it enters or attacks. So if you can find an equipment that gives haste, or maybe if you just have this guy we already saw giving all of your equipped creatures haste, being able to immediately swing in with the Gilgamesh that you just played, that already found all of your equipment in the top 6, and trigger it immediately with haste to find more equipment in the top 6 again, seems crazy. And you even get to equip one of those equipments for free as well that turn. Just so much ridiculous value. I'm telling you guys, equipment is going to be so insane now. It's going to be so pushed. It's going to be a tier 1 deck. I don't know if it'll be the best deck in the format, but it definitely has the potential to be. And Gilgamesh here is probably going to be an important part of that. It's just so much value packed into one card. But next up, we've got Barts and Boo, a 4/3 legendary human bard for 2 green and 3, except a lot of times it's only going to be 2 green because it also has affinity for birds, which makes it cost 1 colorless less for each bird you control, which would normally not really matter that much because bird tribal isn't really a thing in Standard right now. There are only a handful of good birds, except you need to remember that most of this set is still unspoiled. And we know that Chocobos are going to be such a huge part of this set. There are a ton of Chocobo cards on the way, and all of the Chocobo cards count as birds. So it's pretty obvious to me that there's going to be like a Chocobo tribal deck that Barts and Boo fits into. And since it's technically Barts and Boo, it counts as a human and a bird, so this card itself will count as a bird. And it gets even crazier because not only do you get a 4/3 potentially for only 2 green mana with that affinity, but when Barts and Boo enters, each other bird you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature and opponent controls. All of your birds peck their biggest threat to death every time Barts and Boo enters. Whether you flicker it, return it to your hand, and recast it. Just so much insanity, so much ridiculousness you can do with a Chocobo deck, I think. We've already seen a couple Chocobos, and Chocobos look like they're going to be pretty wild. Lots of landfall abilities happening. And I just think this is going to be an auto include in that deck. I'll be really curious to see what the other Chocobos are like, and if a deck like this could actually be like a tier 1, tier 1.5, super relevant in Standard. We're going to have to wait and see, but the potential is there. This just seems awesome. Next up, we've got a Realm Reborn. This is a card that they very quickly spoiled in like a teaser trailer right at the end of the debut unveiling video event. Most people didn't catch it, but I did. This is 2 green and 4 for an enchantment, and other permanents you control have tap to add 1 mana of any color. Could we possibly see some kind of go wide deck using like map tokens and all sorts of crazy, ridiculous go wide permanents that aren't necessarily creatures? We could just jam this, and all of a sudden we have a metric ton of mana to play whatever we want. Crazier things have happened. I honestly think there's a chance there could be a ridiculous combo deck with this card that just... Because you gotta remember, this turns all of your creatures into mana dorks, but it also turns all of your non-creature permanents into mana dorks as well. And I think it's one of the first times we've gotten a card like this that does that. So again, all those map tokens, blood tokens, whatever tokens you want, artifacts, even enchantments. You could play this in an enchantment deck and all of your enchantments can tap to add mana, which just seems awesome. I don't know, there's got to be some crazy way to use this that I'm overlooking. If you have ideas, let me know in the comments, but I just think the card is awesome. Next up, we've got Summoner's Grimoire. This is an artifact equipment for 1 green and 3. It's, again, one of those class equipments that we were talking about earlier, so it has the job select ability, which will create a 1/1 hero token, and then this will become automatically attached to it right away. Otherwise, it equips for 3 with the Abraxas ability. Fun fact, Abraxas is the name of one of the best grimoires that you can get in Final Fantasy XIV, and that's the one that's pictured in the art here. But equipped creature is a shaman in addition to its other types, and has whenever this creature attacks, you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. If that card is an enchantment card, it enters tapped and attacking. So whatever this is attached to, every time you attack, you get a free creature onto the battlefield. But it gets even crazier and supports the theme of actually summoning summons, because if it's an enchantment creature, it's tapped and attacking. That's perfect, considering all of the summons in this set are going to be enchantment creatures. They're all saga creatures. So if you summon an actual summon with the Summoner's Grimoire, it's also just attacking that turn for free with haste, which is awesome. That just seems really, really good to me. I don't know. This card seems super fun. It's nice that it's not limited to the summon cards, though. You can still play it with regular creatures and get value off of it. You can mix and match whatever you want to make use of this. I just think it's a really good card, specifically because it does give you a body that it's automatically attached to when you play it, but then it leaves behind this value if that body dies. So it's really hard for your opponent to kind of like stop you from doing the thing. They can't just kill your creature. You could just re-equip it and keep going about your day. This just seems like a really good card. I have a feeling this is kind of going to be a sleeper. I think this is going to be a lot better than people realize at first, because Elvish Piper style abilities have historically been a little hard to make pop off, right? They're a little cute. We even got one, I believe, in the Aether Drift expansion, and it didn't really go anywhere. But I think this card is going to be great. Next up, we've got Tifa Lockhart, a 1/2 legendary human monk with trample for 1 green and 1. And she has the landfall ability. Whenever a land you control enters, double Tifa Lockhart's power until end of turn. This is the first card we've seen in the set that gives you landfall value that isn't a Chocobo. Originally, I thought it was just the Chocobos that were going to have all these different landfall abilities, but it looks like landfall is going to extend out into the set even further than just Chocobos. And I think landfall decks are going to be nuts. We've already seen like Zell, which I covered in a prior spoiler video, that gives you insane landfall potential. We saw the 1-mana Chocobo that has a landfall ability, and I assume there's a bunch more on the way. I think landfall is going to be a really powerful deck in Standard after this set launches, especially since we just got that 6-mana enchantment in Tarkir Dragonstorm that spits out dragons every time you landfall. I really think there's going to be some crazy 𝑇𝑒𝑟𝑟𝑎𝑛𝑐𝑒 or 5-color landfall deck that's going to be stupid good, and I can't wait to brew it. But next up, we've got Balthier and Fran, a 4/3 legendary creature human rabbit with reach for 3 mana in the colors of Gruul. Vehicles you control get +1/+1 and have vigilance and reach. Whenever a vehicle crewed by Balthier and Fran this turn attacks, if it's the first combat phase of the turn, you may pay 3 mana. If you do, after this phase, there is an additional combat phase. This just seems nuts to me, man. Any vehicles are going to get buffed to high hell, getting +1/+1, vigilance, reach, and an additional combat phase, just because you crewed it with Balthier and Fran. And it has 4 power, so it can work in a vehicle/mount deck with the Selesnya Unicorn there, I believe. What is that card called? I believe it's the Archangel Seraphic Steed. That's it, Seraphic Steed. This can mount the Seraphic Steed, and therefore you could build a deck that cares about both mounts and vehicles and use Balthier and Fran in it. Also, it could just crew things that have a high crew cost because of the 4 power, right? Getting that extra combat phase seems kind of bananas, though. It does cost you mana, so you can't necessarily do it the turn that you play Balthier and Fran, but it's still an insane amount of value you can get later on in the game. And I think they're really trying to push vehicle decks into actually being a thing. Since we have a ton of really good vehicles still in Standard from Aether Drift, I feel like the potential is there for this one. But if you have ideas about what you'd pair with this card, let me know in the comments. Again, a lot of these cards just have so much potential. There's so much depth to how they can be used, and I'm super curious to hear like what you guys are thinking about these cards and how you want to use them. But next up, we've got Kua Genome Sorcerer, a 3/4 legendary human mutant wizard for 4 mana in the colors of Rakdos. At the beginning of your end step, you create a tapped 0/1 black wizard creature token with whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this token deals 1 damage to each opponent, and then if you control 4 or more wizards, you transform Kua. So even before we talk about him transformed, this seems just kind of nuts. Every end step, you get a token that's going to ping your opponent when you cast a non-creature spell. That means you're pinging for 1, and then after it's been out for 2 turns, you're pinging for 2 with every non-creature spell, and then 3, and then by the time this thing flips, you're pinging for 4 damage with every single non-creature spell that you play. That's just crazy. That's just absolutely insane. You could play this in a counterspell deck, or just a control deck where you're just killing everything they put down and doing more and more and more damage. But then when it flips, it gets even crazier. It flips into Transcua Fate Defied, a 4/6 legendary avatar wizard with the Flame Star ability. If a wizard you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage instead. So once you get up to those 4 wizards, now each of those 4 wizards isn't going to ping for 1, doing 4 damage when you play a non-creature spell. They're going to each ping for 2, and you're going to do 8 damage every time you play a non-creature spell. The trade-off being you're now flipped and you no longer make an additional wizard at the end of turn, but you could potentially use transform shenanigans with like Soul Cauldron, like I was talking about earlier, to flip it back and forth. You could maybe just play a second copy so that you can spit out another wizard token. You could even just use other cards that will copy your tokens, like Caretaker's Talent, to make even more wizards. It just seems like there's so many crazy ways to abuse a card like this. I can't wait to brew with it. This set is just filled with insane deck building potential that I am just so eager to tap into. This card is one of them for sure. Just seems kind of bonkers. But next up, we've got Noctis, Prince of Lucis from Final Fantasy XV. This is a 4/3 legendary human noble with lifelink for 4 mana in the colors of Esper, and you may cast artifact spells from your graveyard by paying 3 life in addition to paying their other costs. If you cast a spell this way, that artifact enters with a finality counter on it. So this is a 4/3 lifelink for 4 that just lets you recast all of your artifacts from your graveyard. That just seems insane. It's not limited to artifacts that like cost 3 or less or anything like that. You just have to be able to pay the mana cost and also pay 3 life. You just keep bringing back artifacts from your graveyard over and over and over. That seems kind of crazy to me. I'm not sure the best cards to use with this. I haven't had time to really brainstorm it enough yet. So if you have ideas, let me know in the comments. I think I've been saying that about almost every card so far, but I'm just super excited about this set, and there's just so much potential with every card. So I honestly want to hear how you guys want to use it, because I think the potential is just through the roof. But next up, we've got Squall, Seed Mercenary, a 3/4 legendary human knight mercenary with for 4 mana in the colors of Orzhov, and it has the Rough Divide ability, so whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it gains double strike until end of turn, and whenever Squall deals combat damage to a player, you return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is already kind of insane. If you use the Rough Divide ability to give Squall himself the double strike, he's going to hit twice in combat. If he gets through unblocked and hits twice against the player, you get 2 permanents back that cost 3 or less, and there's no stipulation to the permanent. I think they mistakenly, in the debut video where they spoiled this for the first time, they mistakenly said a non-land permanent, but as you can see here, it's not a non-land permanent. It's literally any permanent with mana value 3 or less. So you can actually return any land if you want to. Most of the time, you're going to have better things to hit, like Caretaker's Talents and Simulacrum Synthesizers and all sorts of craziness. You can return creatures as well. It's just any permanent card. It doesn't care about being a creature. It doesn't care about being a land. And like I said, if you use that Rough Divide ability on Squall himself, you're going to get double triggers of that. But if you're in a situation where you can't attack with Squall, because maybe he's going to die in combat and you want to save his abilities for later, you can just toss that Rough Divide ability on another creature and make it attack with double strike. So you still get value off the Squall. You can even still get value off the Squall the turn he comes into play, still getting that double strike. So I like the versatility there of, if you can get through with Squall himself, you can get insane value. But even if you can't, you can still get some value out of it by giving your one best attacker or whatever the double strike, which a lot of times can just be insane in and of itself. So I think Squall is going to be really sweet. I can't wait to try him out. But next up, we've got Zanarkand, Ancient Metropolis. This is a land town that enters tapped and taps for a green mana, but this is a land that also has an adventure attached. And I'm pretty sure this is the first time we've ever gotten lands with adventure attached, which is pretty awesome, because that means these are lands that can function as value, as board presence later on in the game when you have enough lands down. And so, in a way, this reminds me of the Zendikar modal double-faced cards that could be lands on one side and an actual card on the other. And by including cards like this in your deck, you're able to mitigate some of the problems with Flood and Screw, because you could theoretically have more lands in your deck, but have less cards that are limited to only being lands in your deck, so you kind of get the best of both worlds. But I'm going off on a tangent now. Let's reel it back in. The adventure that's attached to this is a sorcery called Lasting Faith. For 2 green and 4, you create a 1/1 colorless hero creature token, and then put a +1/+1 counter on it for each land you control. So obviously the longer you wait to cast this, the more value you get, the bigger creature that you make. But just the fact that you can top deck this later in the game and have actual board impact on a card that would otherwise just be a land is awesome. It does kind of suck that it enters tapped. But another thing that I want to point out is, like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, this new land town subtype is going to be relevant within this set. There are going to be cards that care about towns and that synergize with towns in some way. We don't know how yet, but in some way similar to Guildgates. So a card like this has even more untapped potential that we just haven't seen yet. And if I was a betting man, I really think there's probably going to be a town deck that's relevant. And the cycle, I'm pretty sure this is a cycle, one in each color, of these adventure lands are probably going to be a huge part of that, because they actually have value tacked on that you can use when you don't need the land. The next card we have here is Jador, Aristocratic Capital, another one of this cycle of cards. A land town that taps for a blue mana and enters tapped, but it has the Overture adventure attached, a sorcery for 2 blue and 4, which makes me wonder if all of the cards in this cycle are going to have sorceries that cost 6 mana, 2 mana of the color and 4 colorless, because we're starting to see a pattern here. But this one in particular makes target opponent mill half their library rounded down. So in a mill deck, this is just your land drop, but later on in the game, you top deck it, you just use it to like almost kill your opponent, mill out half their deck, and help you get to where you need to be to finish off your opponent. Makes me wonder if mill decks are going to be super relevant after this set. I have to assume if this is the ability they chose to put on their one adventure land, then there must be a sub-theme within this set of milling your opponent. And if we get enough value in that way, mill could become a very relevant archetype again in Constructed, in Standard, and that's scary to me. I still haven't quite rid myself of the PTSD from when Rogue Mill was a thing, and I'm trying to reset my brain from that still to this day. That was a bad Standard. If you weren't around for that Standard, consider yourself lucky. But that's going to bring us to the last card in this video, Summon Leviathan. This is a 6/6 summon spell for 2 blue and 4, and on chapter 1, it's a 6/6 and also has ward 2, counts as an enchantment creature Saga Leviathan. On chapter 1, you return each creature that isn't a Kraken, Leviathan, Merfolk, Octopus, or Serpent to its owner's hand. So if you're playing a deck that's just focused on those creature types, most likely just a Merfolk deck, that's something that's easily missed here. You just play this in Merfolk Tribal, and you get to keep all your Merfolk out and bounce everything else, which honestly seems kind of nuts when it's tacked onto a 6/6 Ward 2 creature for 6 to begin with. You could also play this with Changelings, which are going to count as those creature types, which is really interesting. So on Chapter 1, it's sort of a board clear that's maybe one-sided, and then on Chapter 2 and 3, until end of turn, whenever a Kraken, Leviathan, Merfolk, Octopus, or Serpent attacks, you get to draw a card. So I definitely think the best way to use this in Standard is to play this in Merfolk Tribal, just bounce all of your opponent's blockers, be able to swing in with your Merfolk board still intact, get to draw a bunch of cards in subsequent turns, and still have this 6/6 Ward 2 beast on the battlefield. Maybe you could even pixie this back to your hand and replay it to just keep bouncing your opponent's board. That's probably a bit too much, but the potential is there. Either way you slice it, I think this card is really crazy. And again, just another example of just how nuts it looks like the summons are going to be in this set. And we're only really at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to those cards right now. So I'm really excited about seeing what else is coming. But that's going to do it for this video. I do have one more video coming that's going to have all of the mythic rares. Everything that was covered in this video is all of the commons, uncommons, and rares coming to the base set. There's another video on the way, part 2, because there's just too many cards to go over. That's going to have every single mythic rare spoiled, as well as some of the extra cards that were spoiled for Commander, and some of the bonus sheet stuff. All of that's coming in a second video, so please look forward to that coming very soon. And I'll see you guys then. Like the video, subscribe, do all the things. I'll see you on the next one. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck text, that's somewhere over there. And if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.